The crystal glasses clinked against the mahogany bars of the Lancaster Hotel's grand ballroom. My brother's wedding reception was in full swing, a celebration of not just his marriage to the perfect socialite bride, but of everything the Sullivan name represented in Boston's elite circles. I sat at my assigned table, purposefully distanced from the family section, watching the scene unfold. The string quartet played softly, the champagne flowed freely, and Boston's elite mingled with practiced ease. My father, James Sullivan, worked the room like the king he believed himself to be, his silver hair catching the light, his tuxedo immaculate. My phone buzzed silently. A message from Diana, my lawyer. All documents filed. Ready when you are. 3 years of careful planning had led to this moment. 3 years since I discovered the truth about my father's empire, about my grandmother's stolen legacy, about everything the Sullivan name really meant. Julia. My mother's voice cut through my thoughts. She stood beside my table, elegant in her designer gown, disapproval etched on her face. Couldn't you have done something with your hair? It's your brother's wedding. I touched my simple updo, which had cost more than her entire outfit. Hello, Mother. You look lovely. She clutched her champagne glass like a shield. At least you came. Though Michael wasn't sure he wanted to invite you, after everything. Everything. Such a convenient way to package the past 3 years. My dramatic departure from Sullivan Properties, my supposed failure to launch my own career, my absence from family functions. They'd crafted the perfect narrative. Poor Julia, too weak for the business world, too soft for the Sullivan way. If only they knew. I wouldn't miss my brother's wedding, I said softly, watching Michael dance with his new bride, Sarah. She was perfect for him. Old money, impeccable manners, and most importantly, a thorough understanding of her place in the Sullivan hierarchy. My mother hesitated, trying not to cause a scene. Your father's in a good mood. Let's keep it that way. I smiled, thinking about the envelope in my clutch. Don't worry, Mother. Everything will happen exactly as it should. The night progressed predictably. Toasts were made, dances were shared, and Boston's elite congratulated themselves on another successful merger of prominent families. I watched it all from my quiet corner, remembering the night 3 years ago when everything changed. I'd found the documents in my father's private safe, the original will my grandmother had signed before her death, so different from the version that appeared afterward. Then I discovered more. Forged papers, threatened witnesses, decades of systematic fraud that had built the Sullivan empire. When I'd confronted him, he'd laughed. This is business, Julia, he'd said dismissively. You're too soft to understand. This is why Michael will run the company. He gets it. I'd walked away that day, but not before making copies of everything. Then I'd spent 3 years building my own empire under a different name. Alexander Rose Properties, named after my grandmother. No one had made the connection because no one had ever bothered to learn her full name. Now, as the reception reached its peak, my father clinked his glass for attention. Time for his speech. Today, he beamed. My son Michael proves himself once again to be a true Sullivan. He's chosen a wonderful bride. He's leading our company to record profits, and he understands what this family name means. His eyes found me in the crowd, unlike some who share our blood, but not our values. The room grew quiet. Even Michael looked uncomfortable. Julia, my father continued, his voice carrying across the ballroom, you may have been born a Sullivan, but you've proven you don't deserve our name. Your weakness, your so-called ethics, they have no place in our world. I stood slowly, every eye in the room on me. This was the moment I'd been waiting for. You're right, Dad. I said, my voice clear and calm. I don't deserve the Sullivan name. I deserve better. I walked toward him, opening my clutch and removing the envelope. Consider this my wedding gift to the family. He took the envelope, probably expecting a check or a card. But as he opened it, his face turned ash white. What? What is this? The deed to your house, I said loudly enough for everyone to hear. And the mortgage documents showing that Alexander Rose Properties now owns it. I'm your new landlord. The room erupted in whispers. My father's hands shook as he read the papers. This is impossible, he stammered. Alexander Rose, that was your grandmother's. Yes, I smiled. The grandmother you cheated. Turns out, I learned more from you than you thought. I just chose to use those lessons differently. The crystal glasses stopped clinking. The string quartet faltered. Boston's elite stood frozen, watching their king being dethroned by his own daughter. You can't do this, my father hissed, gripping the papers so tightly they crumpled. I'll fight it. Like you fought grandmother's will? I asked quietly. Or should we discuss how you manipulated those documents too? Should we talk about Janet Miller, the nurse you threatened? Or maybe about the offshore accounts where you hide the properties you stole? Michael stepped forward, leaving his bride on the dance floor. Julia, what are you doing? This is my wedding. Yes, it is, I agreed. And Dad just chose to use it as a platform to publicly denounce me. I'm simply responding in kind. Diana emerged from the crowd, tablet in hand. Mr. Sullivan, we have documentation of systematic fraud dating back to 1998, including the illegal acquisition of Alexander Rose Montgomery's property portfolio. Would you like to discuss this publicly, or should we move this conversation somewhere more private? The whispers grew louder. Phones appeared in hands as Boston's elite sensed a scandal brewing. My mother appeared at my father's side, her face a mask of barely controlled panic. Private room, she whispered urgently. Now. We moved to a conference room off the main ballroom. My father, mother, Michael, Diana, and me. The door closed behind us, muffling the buzz of speculation we'd left behind. You think you can destroy everything I built? My father growled, pacing like a caged animal. No, Dad. I'm exposing how you destroyed everything grandmother built. I pulled out my phone, showing him the screen. This press release goes live at midnight. Alexander Rose Properties acquires Sullivan Properties debt portfolio in historic deal. Want to know how I did it? That's impossible, Michael interjected. I oversee all our holdings. There's no way. Check the shell companies Dad created in the Caymans, I suggested. The ones he used to hide grandmother's properties. Better yet, check this. I handed Michael another document, the original will our grandmother had signed, leaving her properties to me with specific instructions for community development and affordable housing. Dad made sure this version disappeared, I explained. Just like he made sure Janet Miller disappeared after she witnessed him threatening grandmother to sign the new will. My mother sat heavily in a chair. James, tell me this isn't true. But my father's face said everything. He knew he was caught. You were always too soft, he spat at me. Just like your grandmother, with her foolish ideas about community service and ethical development. No, Dad, I was never soft. I was patient. And while you were laughing at my supposed failures, I was building something you never could, an honest empire. Diana laid out more documents. Alexander Rose Properties now controls 60% of Sullivan Properties debt, along with direct ownership of key assets, including the family estate. We're prepared to negotiate terms, but only if Mr. Sullivan agrees to step down immediately. Michael was reading through the papers, his face growing paler by the minute. The community center demolition. Mrs. Chen's family restaurant. Dad, what did you do? What I had to do. My father exploded. To build something that would last. To create a legacy. You stole my legacy, I said quietly. Grandmother's legacy. And now, I'm taking it back. The room fell silent, except for the muffled sounds of the reception continuing outside. My father's carefully constructed world was crumbling, and he knew it. What do you want? He finally asked, his voice hollow. Justice, I replied. Starting with the return of every property you stole, the restoration of every business you destroyed, and the implementation of grandmother's original vision for ethical development in Boston. You'll destroy everything. No, Dad, I'll rebuild everything. The right way. The morning after my brother's wedding, Boston's financial district buzzed with carefully controlled chaos. Headlines dominated every major newspaper and business website. Sullivan Properties Empire faces takeover. Alexander Rose Properties reveals true ownership. Real estate dynasty. Rocked by fraud allegations. I sat in my office on the 40th floor of what had been Sullivan Plaza, now renamed Rose Tower as of this morning. The view of Boston Harbor stretched before me, sunlight glinting off the water just as it had when my grandmother had occupied this same office decades ago. My phone hadn't stopped buzzing since dawn. 3 calls from the DA's office. Messages from every major news outlet. Dozens of emails from Sullivan Properties board members. A string of increasingly desperate texts from my father. But the message that caught my attention was from Sarah, my new sister-in-law. We need to talk. Breakfast? I hadn't expected that. At the wedding, after the confrontation, Sarah had managed to keep the reception going with remarkable poise. While my father raged and my mother wept in the private room, Sarah had orchestrated a seamless continuation of the celebration, preventing total social disaster. Ms. Montgomery. My assistant Thomas appeared at the door. I'd officially started using my grandmother's surname this morning. Your brother's here. Michael walked in, still in his wedding suit from last night. Dark circles under his eyes suggested he hadn't slept. He tossed a thick folder on my desk, the complete documentation I'd given him last night. I read everything, he said. Twice. And I need to know why you waited 3 years to expose this. I turned to the wall of windows, watching the city wake up. Because I needed to be certain. To build something strong enough to withstand the fallout. To make sure that when I took everything back, I could do it right. The offshore accounts were just the beginning, I confirmed. Dad's been laundering money through shell companies for decades. The properties he stole from grandmother were just his practice run. Michael sank into a chair. The community center demolition. I signed those papers. He told me it was abandoned property. It wasn't. He forced them out by tripling the rent, then declared it derelict, just like he did to the Chen family restaurant, the immigrant housing complex on River Street, the historic theater district. Stop. Michael held up his hand. I get it. I was part of it. I just didn't know. Because you didn't want to know, I said softly. It was easier to believe I was the weak one, the soft one, while you followed in his footsteps. What happens now? I pressed a button on my desk, and the wall behind me transformed into a digital display. Property maps, development plans, and financial projections filled the screens. Now we rebuild. Everything he destroyed, we restore. Starting with the Chen family restaurant and the community center. I pulled out a contract. Alexander Rose Properties needs a chief development officer, someone who understands both sides of this business. someone ready to learn a better way. Michael stared at the contract. You trust me, after everything? I trust that you've seen the truth now. The question is, what will you do with it? Before he could answer, Thomas appeared again. Ms. Montgomery, your father's here. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Michael half rose from his chair, but I waved him back down. Let him in, I said. It's time to finish this. James Sullivan stormed into my office, looking nothing like the polished real estate mogul yesterday. His clothes were rumpled, his silver hair unkempt, his eyes wild with a mixture of rage and fear. You think you can just take everything? He snarled. I built this company. No, I corrected calmly. You stole this company, piece by piece, starting with grandmother's properties. I simply took back what was rightfully mine. I pulled up more documents on the digital wall. The DA's office is particularly interested in your meetings with Commissioner Bradley about the zoning changes. The ones you claimed never happened. My father's face went pale. You recorded? No, Dad. You recorded it. Your own security system, remember? The one you were so proud of installing. I found the backup files in your private server. What do you want? My father's voice cracked, the fight beginning to drain from him. I want you to look, I said, gesturing to the digital display. Really look at what you destroyed. I pulled up images. The Chen family standing in front of their restaurant on opening day in 1975, the community center's after-school program graduation, the historic theater's final performance before mysterious structural issues forced its closure. These were people's lives, Dad. Their dreams. Their legacies. Just like grandmother's legacy, the one you stole from her deathbed. Michael stood, moving closer to the display. The River Street Project. Those weren't empty buildings we demolished, were they? No, I confirmed. Dad had already arranged their eviction through shell companies, raised rents by 300% overnight, made it impossible for families who'd lived there for generations to stay. It was business, our father protested weakly. Progress. It was cruel, I cut him off. And illegal. The DA has enough evidence to put you away for decades, but that's not what I want. I pulled out another document. A comprehensive agreement I'd spent months preparing. Sign this, I said. Full confession of your financial crimes, immediate resignation from Sullivan Properties, transfer of all remaining assets to Alexandra Rose Properties. In exchange, I'll ensure the criminal investigation focuses on Commissioner Bradley and the zoning board, not you. You'd protect me, he laughed bitterly. After everything? No, Dad. I'm protecting our family name. What's left of it? Sign, and you can retire quietly. Keep your house as my tenant. Maintain your social standing. Play golf with your corrupt friends. Fight me, and everything comes out. Michael picked up the agreement, reading carefully. The Alexandra Rose Foundation. What is this? Grandmother's original vision, I explained. Mixed income housing developments, small business support programs, community space restoration. Everything she wanted to build before Dad decided profit mattered more than people. My father sank into a chair, suddenly looking old. Your mother already agreed to head the foundation's board, I said. Turns out she has quite a talent for charitable organization. Another thing you never noticed about her. The silence stretched as my father stared at the agreement. Finally, he picked up a pen. You really are her granddaughter, he said quietly, signing his name. Yes, I agreed. I am. That's what you never understood. Grandmother's strength wasn't in bullying or manipulation. It was in vision, in purpose, in building something meaningful. After he left, Michael remained, holding the CDO contract I'd offered him. "If I take this," he said, "I want to start with the River Street project. Make it right. It won't be easy," I warned. "These people have every reason to hate the Sullivan name. Then maybe it's time we earned back their trust, the right way." As he signed the contract, my phone buzzed with a message from Sarah. "Still on for breakfast? I have ideas for the Foundation's youth program." I showed Michael the message. "Your wife's impressive." "She is," he agreed. "Says she always knew something was wrong with how Dad operated. Called it old boys club corruption on our first date. Smart woman." "Yeah." He stood, straightening his tie. "The press is going to be all over this." "Let them. It's time Boston knew the truth about both sides of the Sullivan legacy, the corruption and the retention." Looking out over the harbor, I could almost see my grandmother standing there, proud not of the buildings she'd owned, but of what she'd planned to do with them. Now, finally, her vision would become reality. The Sullivan Empire had fallen, but the Montgomery legacy was just beginning. 1 month after the wedding that shattered Boston's real estate dynasty, I stood on the construction site of what had once been the Chen family restaurant. The early morning sun cast long shadows across the partially demolished building, where workers were carefully preserving the original facade while modernizing the interior. Mr. Chen stood beside me, his weathered hands gripping the original deed I'd returned to him last week. "My father built this place," he said quietly. "Worked 3 jobs to buy it. Then one day papers come, rent triple, and we lose everything." "Not everything," I corrected, showing him the renovation plans. "We're restoring it exactly as it was, with updated kitchen facilities and an expanded dining room. The apartment upstairs will be yours again, and the rent will be locked in at the 1975 rate, adjusted only for standard inflation." He studied my face, searching for deception. He'd learned to distrust the Sullivan name. Why? Because my grandmother believed in building communities, not destroying them. And because it's time someone fixed my father's mistakes. My phone buzzed. Michael sending updates from the community center reconstruction site across town. He'd thrown himself into the restoration projects with unexpected passion, working alongside construction crews, meeting with displaced families, learning the human cost of our father's empire. The past month had transformed Boston's real estate landscape. Sullivan Properties had been fully absorbed into Alexander Rose Properties. The DA's investigation had uncovered widespread corruption in the zoning board. Commissioner Bradley faced multiple indictments. My father had retreated to his now-rented mansion, making no public statements. My mother had surprised everyone by excelling at her role with the foundation. But most importantly, we'd begun the real work, restoring what was stolen, rebuilding what was destroyed, and creating something new from the ashes of the Sullivan Empire. "Ms. Montgomery?" Sarah approached, tablet in hand. My sister-in-law had proven to be an unexpected ally, bringing fresh perspectives and genuine commitment to the Foundation's mission. "The River Street families are here." I turned to see a group of people gathering near the construction trailers, former residents of the immigrant housing complex my father had demolished. Many had lived there for generations before being forced out. "Mr. Chen," I said, "would you join us? These people should hear your story." He nodded, clutching his deed like a shield. The meeting was held in what would become the restaurant's new community room. 30 families, each with their own story of loss and displacement, listened as Mr. Chen described his family's journey from ownership to eviction and back to restoration. Alexander Rose Properties isn't just rebuilding buildings, I explained. displaying the development plans. We're restoring communities. Every family here will have the right to return to River Street at their original rent rates. The new complex will include green spaces, community facilities, and small business incubators. Why should we trust another Sullivan? Someone called out. You shouldn't. I agreed. That's why I'm not one anymore. The Montgomery name, my grandmother's name, stands for something different, and we'll prove it, one building at a time. Michael arrived as the meeting ended, his suit dusty from the community center site. They've uncovered the original cornerstone, he reported. The time capsule is still there. The community center's time capsule, buried in 1962 by the neighborhood's founding families. My father had claimed it was lost during demolition. We'll open it at the restoration ceremony, I decided. Let people see their history wasn't completely destroyed. Julia. Michael hesitated. Dad's asking to meet. Says he has information about other properties, other families we should help. I considered this. Is he trying to save himself or make amends? Maybe both. The DA's closing in on his old partners. He might be trying to get ahead of it. Set the meeting for tomorrow. It's time he contributed to the rebuilding. My phone buzzed again. Diana with updates. 3 more properties recovered through legal channels. Settlement negotiations with displaced businesses proceeding well. Foundation's first scholarship program launching next month. Historical Preservation Society offering partnership. Ms. Montgomery. Mr. Chin approached as others left. My daughter, she architect now. She want to help design new buildings. Community buildings. I smiled, remembering my grandmother's words about legacy being more than just property. Have her call my office. We're building something new here. We need people who understand both the past and the future. The next morning, I sat across from my father in my office, watching him struggle with his new reality. He'd aged years in the past month, his once commanding presence diminished by the weight of his exposed crimes. The waterfront district, he said, spreading old documents across my desk. There were 12 families, craftsmen, boat builders. I used shell companies to force them out in '95. I know, I replied. We've already located 10 of them, but 2 families disappeared completely. He nodded, pulling out a worn envelope. The Martinez and the O'Briens. I paid them extra to vanish. The Martinez went to Miami. The O'Briens to Ireland. Why? They knew too much, saw the paperwork I'd forged, threatened to expose everything. I took the envelope, examining its contents. Addresses, contact information, details of the payoffs. Why tell me this now? Because, he said quietly, your grandmother made me promise to protect those families. Instead, I destroyed them, just like I destroyed everything else she built. Before I could respond, Thomas appeared at the door. Ms. Montgomery? They found something at the River Street site. In the construction zone that afternoon, workers had uncovered a hidden basement room beneath the old housing complex. Inside, we found boxes of documents, my grandmother's original plans for the neighborhood, correspondence with community leaders, and detailed records of my father's systematic takeover. She knew, I realized, reading through the papers. She was gathering evidence against you. Yes, my father admitted. That's why I had to act when she got sick. She was planning to expose everything. Michael joined us, his face grim as he examined the documents. There's more, Julia. Records of other properties, other families. Dad's operation was bigger than we thought. I turned to my father. How many? Dozens, he whispered, across 3 states. all people your grandmother had promised to protect. The scope of his crimes, and our responsibility to make things right, expanded with each box we uncovered. But something else emerged too: my grandmother's complete vision for ethical urban development, decades ahead of its time. "This is remarkable," Sarah said, reviewing the plans. "Mixed-income housing, green spaces, small business initiatives, cultural preservation. She had it all mapped out. And now we'll build it," I decided, exactly as she planned, starting here. Over the next several hours, we laid out my grandmother's documents across the construction site's planning room. A blueprint emerged not just for buildings, but for community restoration on a scale Boston hadn't seen in decades. My phone buzzed constantly, Diana coordinating with legal teams across states, the foundation launching outreach programs, contractors adjusting plans to match my grandmother's vision, media requesting interviews about the discoveries. "Julia," Michael called, holding up a sealed envelope. "You need to see this." The envelope, dated just days before her death, contained my grandmother's last letter to me. "My dearest Julia, if you're reading this, you found what I had to hide. Your father's crimes run deep, but your strength runs deeper. I've watched you grow, seen your heart for justice and your mind for business. You are my true heir, not just to my properties, but to my vision of what this city could be. Build it right, my darling. Build it for everyone. Love, Alexandra Rose Montgomery." As I read her words, surrounded by the evidence of both destruction and potential rebirth, I finally understood the full weight of my grandmother's legacy and the true purpose of my 3-year journey to reclaim it. "We'll need to expand the foundation," Sarah suggested. "Create dedicated teams for each community restoration project." Michael nodded, "And establish a legal aid fund for displaced families seeking restitution. Your grandmother," my father said softly, "would be proud, not just of what you've reclaimed, but of what you're building." I looked at him, this broken man who'd chosen power over purpose, and felt not triumph, but determination. "Help us find them," I said. "Every family you displaced, every business you destroyed. Help us make it right." He met my eyes for the first time in weeks. "Where do we start?" "With the truth," I replied. "All of it." As the sun set over the construction site, casting long shadows across the foundations of what would become my grandmother's vision realized, I thought about legacy. Not the false legacy of power and profit that my father had pursued, but the true legacy of building something meaningful, something that lifted people up instead of tearing them down. The Sullivan Empire had fallen, but from its ruins, the Montgomery vision would rise, stronger, truer, and built to last. Not just for profit, but for people. Not just for power, but for purpose. Not just for now, but for generations to come.